Earn $26.5 million in 3 days, or else you are fired. Robert, promoted to sales department manager just a few months ago, yelled at me during our daily morning meeting. He seems to have a knack for bringing people together and being both well-liked and respected by his subordinates. On top of that, he's good at winning over his superiors. But I've always had this feeling about Robert, that he has another hidden side to him. Given his personality and the recommendation of the former manager, it's needless to say that making sales is crucial for a newly appointed sales manager. But just because he's the manager doesn't mean he has to stay on top. Someone who can unite the employees and boost the department's morale would be a better fit. Up until now, with his popularity, Robert would have been considered perfect for the role. Yet, my intuition was right. He turned into a completely different person after getting promoted. $26.5 million. Understood. Making $26.5 million in just 3 days seemed like an unreasonable demand no matter how much I thought about it. But there was something I have been working on with the president behind the scenes. You're all talk, aren't you? The 3-day deadline was also a countdown to when Robert's smirking face would twist in dismay. My name is William, 52 years old. I've been in the semiconductor industry for 30 years since graduating from a college of electronic science. I'm working at a manufacturer that produces semiconductors, which are currently in short supply not just in the US, but all over the world. But our company is what you'd call a small business, unlike some big, well-known corporations. Instead of making a large presence in a city, we conduct our operations in a large factory in a rural area with a view of the sea. Growing up in a small town, I always dreamed of living and working in a glamorous city. But after spending my college years in the city, being from the countryside, I felt like everyone was rushing through life, and it wore me out. So, I decided to work for this company in the countryside. Even though I graduated from an electronic science college, I was assigned to sales, not manufacturing. This is from my request, as I love communicating with people. Even in sales, knowledge about the product is essential. Anyone can get a basic understanding from product brochures, but having specialized knowledge from the start, as I did, was particularly valuable for the sales department, so they placed me there as I had wished. One day, about 10 years after I joined the semiconductor industry, a man was transferred to our branch from another. I'm Robert. I'll be working here from today. Pleased to meet you. The way he greeted us so energetically gave me the first impression that a refreshing smile like that of a salesperson suited him. He didn't need the kind of detailed guidance a newcomer would due to his experience working at a different branch. Even so, it was his first time doing sales in this area. Nice to meet you, I'm William. I'll be working alongside you for a little while. We exchanged our greetings. While showing him around the office and making small talk, I was shocked to learn that despite his youthful appearance, he was actually a year older than me. A fact I still can't forget. It didn't take long for us to hit it off, and we worked well together as colleagues. In the city, you could make a quick visit to a neighboring state where there might be many potential clients. But things aren't so easy in the countryside. Of course, we would visit local clients, but we also often went on out-of-state trips. Another business trip starting next week. It feels like I've been on a trip every month since I got transferred here. Robert sighed heavily as he ate his lunch. I like going on business trips, you know. I enjoy trying out local foods and even the local brews after work. Unlike Robert, I enjoy going on business trips. Talking with locals is fun, and I can gather various information and try delicious food wherever I go. It's also a great way to expand my knowledge and learn, so I would eagerly volunteer to go on trips. Really. I regret accepting the transfer when I realized just how rural this place is. Robert, who was born and raised in the bustling city, found the countryside relaxing and calm at first, but he still probably missed the city life. He occasionally shared his regrets and fond memories of his hometown. This month's Top Salesperson Award goes to William. Congratulations on your first win. All the hard work I had put in finally paid off with this result. I'm not one to obsess over rankings, but being celebrated like this felt good. I broke into a smile with the sound of applause and words of congratulations. Lucky you. You're from an electronics engineering background, right? You must have way more knowledge than us. I'm jealous. Robert didn't come from an electrical engineering background. In fact, he has an arts degree. His parents were educators, so although he didn't want to go to college, they encouraged him to pursue further education. I think academic background doesn't really matter, but some companies do indeed place a lot of emphasis on it. His parents must have given him that piece of advice with his best interests at heart. Well, I might have more knowledge about semiconductors, but you're more skilled in sales, right, Robert? His sales skills, honed through studying economics and business at college, are far superior to mine. We each have our own specialty that we can use to our advantage. At one point, we succeeded in creating a new, improved semiconductor, and there was talk of launching it on the market. In order to sell it, you've got to memorize the product's characteristics, as well as the pros and cons. The brochures we distribute to potential clients are handed out to a salesperson first. I started analyzing them, comparing them to the previous versions. Sure, the differences from the old ones are briefly mentioned, but I like to think it over by comparing the brochures side by side. That way, I can see the key points each brochure tries to advertise and what changes have been made at a glance. Hey, William. So, at the end of the day, there aren't any huge differences, right? Just a change in materials. After telling him about another product in detail, Robert kinda gave up on thinking for himself and started asking me to tell him everything. I didn't mind sharing my knowledge with others, but to be honest, I wished he'd think for himself a little more since he's not a newbie. No, it's not just the materials, you know. They've managed to enhance power performance while keeping power consumption down. But maybe I was too soft for spilling all the details as they come to mind. Robert tilted his head but took notes diligently, so I couldn't really brush him off. I told myself that increasing our knowledge benefits our customers, too. Robert is amazing, isn't he? Even though he's not from a science background, he really knows a lot, and I respect that. One morning, as I headed to the break room to make some coffee, I found a newcomer and Robert chatting. Nah, this is pretty standard stuff. You should read the materials thoroughly and study properly. It seemed like Robert was giving advice to the newcomer. I know for a fact that Robert had not gone through the material thoroughly, so his piece of advice to the newcomer must have been second-hand knowledge from me. I didn't mind him sharing my advice to the newcomer, but I was uncomfortable with him presenting it as if it was his own idea. But I decided to let it go, not wanting to stir up any trouble and figuring if it helps someone, why not? Little did I know, my tendency to avoid conflict would later lead to much bigger issues. Robert, you've got great communication skills, but your sales figures aren't showing much improvement. It's a shame, really. You're liked by both your subordinates and superiors, a perfect employee in that regard. One day at lunch, the manager muttered, while he was having lunch with Robert and I still have a long way to go. I'd really like to make it to the top of the rankings someday. Despite his usual confidence and bravado in front of his subordinates, he would act humble in front of his superiors. I was probably the only one in the department who knew this side of him. However, if I hadn't stumbled upon that scene with the newcomer the other day, I might not have noticed. Oh, I just thought of a good idea. Why don't you join William on his business trip next month? You both have strengths that complement each other, and it would be a learning opportunity. The manager, seemingly pleased with his own suggestion, nodded in agreement with himself. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I was curious about Robert's communication skills, so I accepted the proposal. Of course, Robert did too. The business trip was a success, and thanks to Robert's sales skills, we secured a contract that was even better than what we had planned. I tended to recommend things only if I see a clear benefit for the client, preferring a more by-the-book approach, which can be seen as either sticking to the script or, less kindly, being too rigid. However, Robert wasn't afraid to take a bit of a gamble, leveraging his communication skills to push a little harder. This time, having someone with in-depth product knowledge like me might have helped, but I think he was always aiming for the big deals. Otherwise, it's hard to explain his lack of sales growth despite his obvious skills. William, a lukewarm sales approach won't cut it. You gotta push harder like me. That's true, but it's better than not getting any results, right? Maybe if you calm down a bit, your results would improve. Going after big contracts isn't everything, you know. After successfully sealing the deal, We celebrated at a pub near our hotel. Maybe it was the alcohol, but despite our feelings of appreciation, it eventually turned into a bit of nitpicking. "Hey Robert, you've had enough. Let's head back." Continuing the argument would cause a nuisance to the pub, and Robert was already thoroughly drunk, slurring his words. I settled the bill and somehow dragged him back to the hotel on unsteady feet. Time passed, and both Robert and I entered our 50s. Friendly and caring Robert steadily climbed the ranks and became a section manager a few years ago. Unlike me, still a rank-and-file employee. He's now rumored to be in line for a managerial position. "Sorry, William. Your sales performance is better than mine, yet I keep getting promoted." Every time he was promoted, he'd flash that smirking smile at me. While I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in promotion, I've always felt I'm not cut out to be a leader. I'm reasonably liked by my colleagues and sometimes receive praise from my superiors, but leading people is not my forte. In that respect, Robert has the necessary skills, which have been recognized. I am grateful to you all. I've left the rest to Robert here, so keep up the good work. Would I really be the right person for manager? My sales performance isn't even that good, he says humbly, but there's not a hint of uncertainty on his face. Performance isn't everything. What matters is the ability to lead and the charisma to do so, and you have that. Don't worry. The rumors turned out to be true. I'm 52 this year, and Robert is 53. That's when Robert was officially appointed as the new manager. Applause and cheers for Robert broke out along with words of appreciation for the former manager. I managed to smile and clapped along, catching Robert's smirking glance. However, it didn't take long for his true nature to reveal itself. Earn $26.5 million in 3 days, or else you are fired. Robert, promoted to sales department manager just a few months ago, yelled at me during our daily morning meeting. The former manager had said that he had the ability to bring people together and lead them. Indeed, his behavior up to now had made him a well-liked and respected figure among his subordinates. Additionally, he was good at interacting with his superiors, winning their favor. But I've always had this feeling about Robert, that he's hiding behind a facade. My intuition was right. After attaining the position of manager, he had changed completely. $26.5 million. Making $26.5 million in just 3 days seemed like an unreasonable demand no matter how much I thought about it. My juniors and colleagues alike were shocked by such a sudden statement, with some widening their eyes and others gaping open-mouthed. Yeah. Because you're getting outperformed by a guy with an arts degree, you know. Having knowledge is useless if it doesn't reflect in the results. You'd just be in the way. It's true that since I topped the sales rankings a few years back, I haven't managed to be on top again. I'm barely making it into the top 5. I sighed, understood. Being fired at this age would honestly be tough. All bark and no bite, huh? Robert probably said that because he wanted to push me out of the company. But little did he know, I had something up my sleeve that I'd been working on behind the scenes with the former manager and the president. The 3-day deadline was also a countdown to when Robert's smirking face would twist in dismay. Robert. He was even praised by the former manager. It's hard to believe he would do such a thing. I immediately went to the president after receiving the order from Robert to make $26.5 million within 3 days. Whether he was praised or not, it's only natural to find such a demand unbelievable. I've had a hunch that he hasn't been fond of me over the past few years, but trying to push me out was something I hadn't expected. When Robert first transferred, we used to go out for drinks and were quite close. It's unclear where things went wrong, but likely, he was just pretending to be amiable to climb up the ranks, all to secure the position of manager. I reported to the president everything I'd bottled inside up until now out of wanting to avoid conflict. Actually, some of my clients were snatched by him. He lied about the account manager changing. After accompanying him on that business trip recommended by the former manager and getting a taste of success in a big deal, Robert began to follow my clients around. Of course, he had his own clients, so it wasn't every time, but he would coincidentally join me or apply for business trips to the same area, employing every trick in the book. Negotiations rarely result in a contract being signed on the spot. It usually takes several discussions, mutual adjustments, and then, as a result, a contract is formed. Once it got to the stage of bringing in the contract, Robert would get in touch with the client and set up a meeting without my permission. Wait, that matter. Robert already came by a few days ago and got us to sign. I heard William was off sick. The clients proceeded with the agreement without a doubt, seeing as Robert had tagged along in the meetings too. Hey, Robert. Why are you approaching my clients without permission? You have your own accounts to handle. Is there a problem? Look at this contract. The terms and conditions are far better than what we discussed back then, aren't they? I couldn't ignore it anymore and confronted him once. But the contract he handed over indeed had terms that were slightly better than what I had negotiated. Behind my back, he had taken his favorite gamble. If successful, he'd secure the contract as his own achievement, and if rejected, he'd simply withdraw as if nothing happened, allowing the contract to be finalized with the terms I proposed. Since the client was already interested in signing a contract, proposing something new and being rejected wouldn't hurt. Such actions are unthinkable. Pursuing profit is good, but stealing from others isn't right. The president himself, having had high hopes for Robert, looked saddened and slightly angry. Well, actually, as a manager, he doesn't have the authority to fire employees, but you wouldn't want to just let it slide, right? Maybe it's time to start that plan. Yes. I'm ready to move on this immediately, and I'll contact the other party to see if we can expedite the timeline. I'll go and talk to them directly. When I said this, the president said, I'll come with you. And we immediately started preparing. Oh, William. Yes, understood. When I returned from the president's office, Robert was on the phone with someone. As soon as he finished, I approached him to talk. I hadn't used formal expressions when speaking with Robert, but I did so, despite the awkwardness, during work hours to pay due respect to his position as manager. Manager, it's sudden, but I'd like to go on a business trip starting tomorrow. May I submit my application? I handed him the application. Normally, I would apply at least a week in advance, so a last-minute request like this would be inconvenient and likely to be rejected. I was thinking about how I could persuade him as I spoke. However, my worries were unnecessary. Yeah, I got a direct call from the president just now. He told me to allow it. Working hard for that $26.5 million, huh? He added a comment about it being impossible as he stamped his approval on the application and handed it back to me. The application, which required details of who was traveling where and for how long, was approved with no questions, for he didn't bother to check it properly. He should have noticed that something was off if he had looked closely. The next day, at 10 in the morning, the president and I flew to our destination. Thank you for your cooperation, especially with the sudden schedule change. Let's get right to it. I began to delve deeper into the details based on the documents I had prepared. I led the negotiation with the president accompanying me as support. It's truly remarkable. Why don't you expand your company if you can make such high-quality products? Our company, while not widely known, has a reputation that often leads clients to suggest it's too valuable to remain a small business. Even a layman like me could see that expanding branches or factories would surely be profitable, given the current shortage of semiconductors. However, expansion requires hiring more people. The president is very considerate of the employees, making monthly rounds to all the branches and factories. He empathizes with any issues and listens sincerely to any concerns. According to the president, he fears that expanding the company might lead to him overlooking any potential issues. He once told me that as an organization, it's harder for a company to have no problems at all, but he doesn't want to be greedy and cause trouble not just for the employees but also for the clients. I believe expanding the company isn't everything. I admire the president's philosophy, which is why I've continued to work here for so long. After successfully signing the contract with our client, we hurriedly boarded a bus to the airport. It's great that everything went well. It's a shame we couldn't do any sightseeing since we came all this way. Well, it can't be helped. They're going to be an important partner from now on. There will be plenty of chances to visit again. Even at the airport, we didn't have time to buy souvenirs. I felt a bit sad to leave as we boarded the plane again. Hey, it's been 3 days since then. Huh? How's that $26.5 million going? The next morning, I rubbed my sleepy eyes as I headed to work. Just as I thought of grabbing a coffee to wake up, That voice came out of nowhere. I bet it's not done yet, huh? Well, the day's just started. I'll give you until the end of the day. Robert cheerfully returned to his desk. I watched his back as I sipped my coffee, muttering to myself that his laughter would not last long. When the workday began, the usual morning meeting was held. After the morning greetings, today's schedule, and various reports, it was time to start work. Excuse me, I have something to report, if that's all right. Today was the deadline for Robert's absurd demand to earn $26.5 million in 3 days. My words caused a stir among my colleagues and subordinates, who whispered among themselves, "Hey, what's up? Came to hand in your resignation letter, did you?" Robert said that, extending his palm towards me as if to encourage me to get on with it. Instead of a resignation letter, I placed a neatly filed document on his palm. "Huh? What's this file?" "Not a resignation letter, huh?" he muttered, opening the file with sluggishly. As Robert reviewed the documents, his eyes gradually widened in shock, almost popping out of his head. His hands holding the file started to tremble, and I couldn't help but smirk at his reaction. "How about that? I met the sales target as you demanded, so there's no need for me to be fired, right? Just as demanded." My words sent my colleagues and juniors rushing over to Robert, eagerly grabbing the file to see for themselves. "Can't be true. Is this for real?" they exclaimed in surprise, turning their gaze towards me. "I've been working on this with the president since the former manager was here. Your words, Manager Robert, just pushed us to expedite things a bit." Robert was shaking, seemingly unable to grasp the situation. That was when the president appeared, just at the right time. "Good morning, everyone in the sales department. What's all this commotion about?" The president pretended to just happen to pass by, but this was all part of our plan. Knowing Robert, I figured he wouldn't take my word for it, dismissing it as nonsense. Robert, who had been inattentive, snapped to attention at the president's voice. "President, no, it's just William's bad joke. More importantly, what can I do for you this first thing in the morning?" As expected, Robert didn't believe it and chuckled dryly, thinking it was a joke. Yes, William did an astounding job indeed. I was thinking of setting up a celebration for him, and I came to talk to you about it. "What? William's achievement? So that means the contents of this file." Robert snatched the file that my colleagues had been flipping through and looked at it again. There it was clearly stated. Contract established. Contract amount $26.5 million. The details of the contract were meticulously listed. "Can't be. Is this real? A contract with that global giant, and for $26.5 million. Yes, in the past 3 days, I had managed to secure a contract worth the $26.5 million Robert had challenged me with. Moreover, the contract was not with a Japanese company, but with a globally renowned corporation headquartered abroad. In our industry, it would be an understatement to say there's no one who hasn't heard of them. It's no joke. And you did see the business trip application, right? It said Germany. The reason we didn't have time for sightseeing or buying souvenirs was because of the tight 3-day deadline he set, forcing us to return quickly. Due to the time difference, we didn't have time to relax there." "You're kidding. We've never dealt with overseas transactions before." "Well, to be honest, my language skills are pretty rusty, and we don't have employees fluent enough to handle such conversations. Dealing with overseas transactions undeniably requires language proficiency. Hiring an interpreter is an option, but for a small business like ours, it's questionable whether it would be worth it or not. We've been doing well with domestic clients and decided there was no need to stretch ourselves since our management is publicly listed. However, with the global increase in demand for semiconductors in recent years, I spotted an opportunity." The president was hesitant for similar reasons, but he warmed up to the idea when I mentioned my proficiency in languages. "My parents are educators. While my father is mainly focused on the sciences, my mother graduated from a language college and has studied abroad. She is fluent in German and Chinese, as well as 4 other languages. This made them ensure that I studied German at least, which came in handy here. Not to mention, I'm also proficient in Chinese, which has been increasingly in demand recently. I was there too. It's definitely his achievement. Too bad you couldn't snatch it, huh?" The president, who had been speaking in a cheerful tone, lowered his voice and addressed Robert. The sudden change in tone made Robert and everyone else in the room shiver. Snatching. That's a serious accusation. Despite boasting about his knowledge, he's been unable to secure any big contracts because his sales skills don't match up. All I did was step in and give him some divine intervention to secure a better deal. Despite everything being exposed, Robert still tried to justify himself, which looked quite comical to us. Ignoring our cold stares, he continued, "And this is because of my encouragement. Without me, he couldn't have achieved such a feat." "Oh, and the celebration, was it? When shall we have it?" He tried to divert the conversation, but beads of sweat were slowly forming on his forehead. The president sighed deeply at Robert's behavior. He said that he had high hopes for him, so he must have been disappointed. "How about we make it a celebration for William's achievement and announce your punishment, Robert?" Robert's face turned pale instantly at the word punishment. It was my first time seeing someone's complexion change so rapidly. "Punishment? What do you mean? Do you think I'm not aware of anything? I've heard everything from William here." Robert glared at me, but I met his gaze without flinching. I had always avoided conflict and never talked back, but this time, I decided to stand my ground. "I've reported everything. How you've been snatching me contracts for years, how you've become harsher with subordinates since you became manager, and all the rest. Whether it's snatching or not, if the contract is beneficial for the company, it's all good. Being strict with subordinates is part of their training." Despite the president being right there, Robert lashed out at me, forgetting to maintain his facade. Everyone could see that this was Robert's true nature. "Enough. I thought you were fit to lead, but I was mistaken. Go home for today and stay there. You're suspended." "Excuse me. The sales department won't function without me. What will you do?" Truth be told, the department functions better without Robert. Being a manager involves not just overseeing the whole department, but also additional paperwork. He did a decent job during his first few days, but now he looks for people to do it for him. Since we're often out on sales visits, Robert is often left alone in the office. During that time, he takes phone calls rather reluctantly, but he doesn't get much else done. Instead, he's shopping on the internet, and sometimes there were even video games loaded on his computer screen. He switched the windows on his screen as soon as one of us approached his desk, so he must have thought he never got caught. Robert didn't like the suspension, and he tried to argue how irreplaceable he was, but no one agreed with him. "Shut up. Don't embarrass me any further. Go home now." With his face flushed red in anger, the president yelled, causing Robert, teary-eyed, to leave the room hastily. Day after day, he dealt with tasks such as sorting documents, guest reception, taking phone calls, and office supplies management. These tasks, crucial as they are, seemed mundane compared to his days in the sales department. However, since he became manager, he started pushing his work onto others while using his computer for private purposes during work hours. He got demoted to a general employee and got an order to transfer to the administration department. How am I supposed to deal with this, damn it? Day after day, he dealt with tasks such as sorting documents, guest reception, taking phone calls, and office supplies management. These tasks, crucial as they are, seemed mundane compared to his days in the sales department. Though he became arrogant with his managerial position, watching him during negotiations, it was clear he did love the sales job. He didn't get fired, but Robert submitted his resignation and disappeared from the company within a week, perhaps out of shame. No one knows where he is or what he's doing now. Given the lack of sightings in this not-so-large area, he's probably living somewhere else. William. No, Manager William. Congratulations on your achievement and promotion. With Robert gone, the managerial position became vacant. Surprisingly, I ended up fitting in there. I wanted to refuse, thinking I lacked the qualities, but couldn't say no under the president's direct recommendation and compelling gaze. You don't have to shoulder everything alone. I'm only able to be the president because I'm supported by all of you, my employees. It's not about the position. Supporting each other is what's important. Everyone nods in agreement with the president's words. Come on, let's make a toast. With the call for a toast, the sound of glasses clinking together fills the air. Though I'm still inexperienced, As the new manager of the sales department, I hope I can liven it up more than ever before.